The trident is not a symbol meant to inspire reverence. It is not an artistic relic or mythological ornament. It exists because reality itself requires a structure that can create, end, and decide without collapsing under contradiction. Where this structure is missing, systems rot. Where it is distorted, power becomes sentimental and ineffective. Where it is denied, chaos eventually replaces intention. Most spiritual teachings fail because they attempt to operate on a single axis. They elevate creation without limitation, compassion without consequence, growth without pruning. These teachings are human and very humane, but they do not survive contact with reality. Anything that creates without the ability to end will eventually suffocate itself. Anything that preserves without discernment becomes stagnant. Anything that destroys without authority becomes reckless. The trident exists because one force alone cannot hold a world. The trident is composed of three simultaneous capacities that must exist together or not at all. The womb brings into existence. The blade, on the other hand, cuts, separates, and ends. The law decides when each is applied. This is not balance. Balance implies compromise. The trident is control through range. It allows power to move forward, retract, or hold without apology. The womb is the most misunderstood of the three forces because it has been softened, romanticized, and stripped of its authority. The womb is not nurture. It is not gentleness. It is not emotional warmth. The womb is capacity. It is the raw ability to generate form, continuity, momentum, and future. Creation is not inherently benevolent. It is simply productive. The womb does not ask whether something should exist. It answers only whether it can. This is why creation alone is dangerous. When the womb is worshipped without restraint, worlds become overcrowded with ideas, identities, movements, projects, children, and beliefs that were never meant to coexist. Endless manifestation without pruning produces noise, not evolution. The true womb is selective. It creates with the knowledge that everything brought into being will eventually need to be tested, limited, or ended. Creation without the willingness to end is attachment masquerading as love. Feminine power has always frightened systems of control precisely because the womb does not seek approval before generating futures that displace existing orders. The womb is forward-facing power. It is the potential with momentum. But momentum without precision becomes a flood, and floods destroy indiscriminately. That is why the blade exists. The blade is where most people recoil, because the blade exposes the lie that love and continuation are always virtuous. The blade is not cruelty. It is not rage. It is not violence for pleasure. The blade is precision applied to excess. It removes what threatens the integrity of the whole. Every functioning system relies on cutting. Bodies rely on cell death. Ecosystems rely on predation. Lineages rely on exclusion. Psychics rely on boundaries. When the blade is banished from spiritual language, decay is reframed as compassion. Everything is tolerated. Nothing is ended. Boundaries dissolve quietly. Corruption spreads without resistance. The blade does not debate. It does not explain itself emotionally. It does not justify its timing. It cuts because continuation would cause collapse. In the house of the Trident, the blade is honored because it protects the womb from poisoning the field with excess. Without the blade, creation becomes infestation. Without the blade, mercy becomes weakness. Without the blade, law loses teeth. But the blade alone cannot govern reality, because cutting without discernment leads to destruction without future. That is why the third force is indispensable. The law is not morality. The law is not fairness. The law is not consensus. The law is the intelligence that decides sequence. It determines when creation opens, when cutting occurs, and when nothing happens at all. This is the most mature and least emotional aspect of power, and therefore the most feared. True law does not rush. It does not react. It does not announce itself. It observes pressure, trajectory, and consequence. It waits until action becomes inevitable. This is why quiet authority is always more dangerous than loud control. When the law moves, the outcome has already been sealed. Rules are external. They can be negotiated, broken, or reinterpreted. Law, on the other hand, is structural. It operates regardless of belief or disobedience. In the feminine current, law is instinct refined into judgment. It is knowing what must happen next, not what feels right in a moment. Without law, the womb becomes reckless and the blade becomes chaotic. With law, creation becomes strategic and destruction becomes corrective. Most people attempt to live on one prong of the trident and call it virtue. Some choose endless creation and burn out. Some choose endless cutting and isolate themselves. Some cling to rigid order and stagnate. The trident demands range. It requires the ability to create without attachment. It cuts without hatred, and it judges without emotion. This is why it is uncomfortable. It requires responsibility for consequence. Modern spirituality has trained people to fear the blade and distrust law, elevating endless softness as enlightenment. But power fears itself cannot hold reality. Power that fears itself cannot hold reality. The trident is not about becoming harsh. It is about becoming effective. When you embody the trident, you stop asking whether something is kind or acceptable and start asking whether it sustains or collapses the system. At this level, that is the only question that matters. The House of the Trident exists to restore this structure without apology. Every goddess current, every teaching, every doctrine returns to this law. If a force cannot create, end, and decide, it is not sovereign power. This teaching is not meant to be admired. It is meant to be inhabited. Once you see the trident clearly, you cannot unsee why relationships fail, movements rot, empires collapse, and individuals exhaust themselves trying to be only one thing. The trident does not ask you to be gentle. It asks you to be accurate. And accuracy is the highest form of respect reality recognizes.